0.2 of a mile, and therefore introducing 12 glamping pods would massively increase the potential residency within the street, and therefore the challenges that Richard described with the lane. As I live the furthest down the lane, I often meet many of the people you see in the room tonight, and they are in the green or up in the hedge trying to get past, particularly challenging after dark in the winter months. And when you meet another vehicle, you have to reverse a considerable distance in order for it to just be possible to pass. Particularly exaggerated at certain times of the year when there's heavy farming traffic as well, with significant size machinery and trailers, which are near on impossible to reverse. I think the combination of people on foot and the volume of traffic, particularly after dark, if people are encouraged to walk to the Red Cow and so on, suggests to me there's a significant risk there. In terms of some inaccurate information or lack of information there, I can confirm, as the present owner of Middle Street, having known the previous owners all my life, as have my family, there has never been planning approval or allowance for 12 caravans on that site. It was always a caravan club certified site with a maximum of 5 caravans, and to my memory and to my family's memory, and I think other people have said that, I don't think there was ever more than 2, maybe 3 caravans at a time. So I'm unclear where that's come from. I understand part of the structure is on Network Rail land, as is on my side of the bank. The bank belongs to Network Rail, and I think it's in flood zone 3. I don't think Richard sort of picked up on that. That becomes a challenge, and I think I'd probably just like to point out a couple more points there. One of the scale drawings of the vehicle on the road looks significantly out of scale, given the perception that the road is particularly wide. And a very similar planning application for just 5 glamping pods was turned down by Sedgemoor Planning this May for the noise and disruption to the local area. Moving on to the impact on the ecology, I think it's sort of common knowledge that significant human activity, in particular, the noise, the traffic, light pollution, those sorts of things, has a negative impact on wildlife. I think Mark quite rightly points out there were some errors in the ecology report. So both there's definitely a badger set there, and there is a water voles present. There is an abundance of newts at my property, so I would assume that newts are able to be over the road. And there's a significant number of bats there as well. So I think if you spend any time down Middle Street walking, there's a breeding pair of barn owls, there's little owls, deer, rabbits, hare, kingfisher, and so much more. And the very reason why there's such a volume of wildlife down there is the lack of human activity. And that very fact that I understand that's really attractive to potential customers to come and immerse themselves in that wildlife, but I think it is common knowledge that that would only drive that wildlife away. So I think that's all I need to say.
Thank you,
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any questions of Jason at all? Or release Jason? Tony.
Hi, I live just around the corner from Middle Street, and we use it a lot. We walk our dog down there every day. I've lived here for, nearly 30 years now. Right. It will increase the traffic approximately 10 times, and at busier times result when gridlock, when the cars are having to back up several hundred metres. Cyclists and horses cannot be passed by cars safely, nor can people with buggies be passed or mobility scooters. And in fact, when cars try to turn into Middle Street, if something's coming out, it's not wide enough for that to happen. And the highway code states that cars should not back out onto a bigger road like Burton Road. So it's causing traffic to break the highway code. Under the Countryside Act 2000, there has to be a rights of way improvement plan. Somerset County Council has their rights of way improvement plan too, and one of the aims, 5 aims they have, is to develop a safe and improved access network. The increase in traffic will conflict with the access to the bridleway at the bottom of Middle Street, because that is the only way it can be accessed. And this section of Middle Street is the only one with traffic between the village and the beach for walkers, cyclists and horses. There are quite a few horse riders use it to access the beach. If the site was accessed directly from a suitable road, such as Burton Row with a safe junction, then many of my objections will be overcome. So I'm objecting really on a lot on the traffic. However, it is also important to remember that the previous application, which included retrospective permission for the 150 tonnes of earth dumped on the site, was withdrawn, and the current application does not include that permission. So I consider this application shouldn't be considered until the retrospective non-compliance has been rectified. I may be mistaken, but I cannot find any evidence between the two that that has been done. So those are my points in a nutshell. Sorry, any questions?
Any questions for Tony? No. Well made, thank you, Tony. Beverly, please.
Mine's very brief because it's basically all been said, but from the point of view of a horse rider going down Middle Street, it is one of only 2 bridleways, the other one being Crooked Lane. The increase in traffic is getting very hard, it's very difficult to ride the horses on the road. There's been cases of verbal abuse to horse riders recently riding through the village. And if you then increase the traffic on Middle Street, that first part is very hard to pass cars. You have to go on people's drives, which I'm very sorry for people, if I've ended up on your drive and you've got to pass, or you've got to turn the horse round. And I don't know whether people are aware, but horses don't take kindly to being constantly turned around and have to go back and then back down the other way. Makes them a bit skittish. It's not a very safe idea. Okay, that's me.
Thank you, Beverly. I have one question of Mark myself. You state that there are going to be shepherd's huts, but you also state in your application that you're going to make these shepherd's huts out of old railway containers. Can you give us more information on the structures that you're proposing there, because it seems like a bit of a scrap heap. And also, can you outline, you say you're going to sell your sculptures on site. Where are these going to be located? What's it going to look like?
On the sculpture trail that's shown on the planning drawings. We're not selling them on site, we're displaying them on site. We sell them through the internet. But various people in the village have asked whether we could display them. And I can't display them up Middle Street for the obvious reasons. So,
can you give us more explanation though on the accommodation side of it? Your application says I'm going to have shepherd's huts.
Sorry.
I'm going to make these
the application that should be being talked about is for the bases, not what goes on them. So at the moment the application is for a change of use to put in 12 bases. So I don't need to give details of the shepherd's huts. It's not a requirement of the planning, because the planning is a change of use to create the bases, but what the actual shepherd's huts are going to be based on is we've got some old farm bale trailers, and they're going to be mounted there. So everyone knows what a shepherd's hut looks like, I assume. They seem to be in vogue at the moment. They will be standing on a bale trailer, so they're going to be approximately 2.9 to 3 feet above the ground, which is why there is no flood risk.
And on your flood report, it says that your units will be 24 to 30 inches off the ground because they'll be on wheels.
Yeah.
So it protects your units, but how is it going to protect the public and the public's vehicles that are on site there? What are you going to do about those if they're in a flood zone through? You've protected your property.
Sorry, if there is flooding, I mean, greatest respect, unless there's going to be a tsunami and a sudden inundation, it would be a gradual situation. It would have to be the Reens collapsing, reversing backwards, all of the lock gates failing, the sluice gates failing. You would have plenty of time. And quite frankly, I think half a dozen cars getting off the site will be small fry to the situation of houses in the village going under a metre of water. Because if the shepherd's huts are sinking, then my house, for one, would be very damp.
I think that one of the planning things that we need to consider, and I've asked you to try and explain it to me, is the architecture and the detailed laying out of the site. In particular, I'm concerned about the architecture, the visual impact that this is going to have.
There will hardly be any visual impact because the earth bund is on the north side. And it's in the drawings. You've got sectional drawings.
We can see
yeah.
that.
So therefore, to the north there won't be anything. To the west there's no visibility because of both the railway line and the trees that are in the plantation. To the east with the additional plantation, effectively somebody looking from Burton Road is going to see open countryside, hedging and the arched top of a shepherd's hut.
Thank you. Any other questions of any of the speakers on 009?
Yes.
Yes.
How big is the site?
10 acres.
How much?
10.
Do you actually own those? Because I understand part of it may well be owned by Network Rail at this moment.
The situation is, because of COVID, the land registry is taking a while to catch up, but we've had unchallenged occupancy for 18 years, so we've made the application to have the pond ceded to our title deed.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on now, please. Application 0013, 56 Brent Street. Who would like to speak first, Alison or Abby?
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alison Barnes and I live directly next door to 56 Brent Street, which is the planning proposal. So I do object to this application on the following grounds of very over-dominance and overshadowing and loss of light to my property, as it's very, very close to my property, overcrowding to the site, there will be an impact appearance, visual dominance to the local area, an impact on my privacy to my property by any of the windows, particularly on the upper level side elevation, facing back elevation of Knoll Cottage. Hopefully you've all seen the plans, so you know what I mean on those. I am concerned on the overall height of the building, as it appears taller than my property on the site plans. The boundary walls, which butts up to Abby's property, which is the garage, will be affected as shown on the proposed site layout at 102A. So I'd like to know how that's going to be erected if it goes through. I've had no written confirmation of the proposed plans to renew the boundary, because it is actually my boundary that will be affected. However, I am in support of, of Abbey to add any annex to existing residential property to meet the requirements of the applicant. If placed in the same orientation, this would maintain suitable distance and continuing to protect right for light, limit noise, impact, and visual building dominance immediate to my property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Abby.
Hi, my application for a two-bedroom dwelling is between my present cottage at 56 Brent Street and Alison's property at 1 Battersborough Lane, which is classed as infill on the council. The proposal for the dwelling is for my husband and myself to live in, unlike one of the comments that was posted that it was to make a quick move on, which is not true.
my 3 adult children would remain in the cottage at 56 Brent Street. They're all at university on very, very long courses and no chance of moving on, affording their own property or anything else. So this was for us to live in and for them to remain in the cottage as long as they needed to. And then obviously eventually they would move on and we would sell the cottage and we would only then need a small 2-bedroom property, which is what we've had plans drawn up for. Alison's, most of Alison's objections from speaking to her have been based on the lack of taking her light. But we have spent a lot of time adjusting plans to address Alison's 2 windows on the back of her property. One of them is in her ensuite and one of them is her half landing, both with obscure glass. The property is pulled forward, as you can see on the plan, to avoid being in front of her 2 windows. So that's the reason that we've pulled the property forward, is to address that. That's Alison's 2 windows, which you can see on the plan, and this is the back of the dwelling here. With regard to the boundary wall, we're not on the boundary wall, the house isn't on the boundary wall, the house actually starts, and that was something else we've taken into consideration, is not to butt up to Alison's boundary wall. The house actually starts halfway across the garage that is already there. So she's got a bigger space between the boundary wall and what she's got now, but with the new dwelling. So we've actually considered that by taking that red on the map is taken out, and the property starts in what would be over halfway across the garage that's there now. So we're not actually on the boundary wall. The boundary wall can stay there if you like, but I would think you'd be quite pleased if we did rebuild the boundary wall because it's in such a state anyway. And with regard to the light that is coming in from those 2 back windows that are obscured, the ensuite and the half landing, that only light is coming down into her hall. They're not living rooms, they're a hall that she uses as a snug. They're not her reception room or her kitchen rooms. They're just back room, and they're on the back of her property. Plus, we pulled it forward so that she still will get the light. She's not going to get the sunset that she wants. I can't guarantee where the sun will be when it's setting, which I know is something that she's raised. And also, with regard to calling it an annex, it's not really a viable thing to build an annex there. It would have to be quite, we want a house, not a retirement property for 2 of us. We're both still working. And eventually, those 3 children will eventually go, maybe in 7 to 10 years, depending on their careers and what happens with university. But then, I would then not be able to sell the cottage at 56 Brent Street to live in the property that I'm proposing to build. I'll be then stuck with a 4-bedroom cottage and a 2-bedroom annex, which, makes no sense at all. I don't want to be stuck with that forever and a day. We would obviously want to downsize, and this is our way of going into that property, but serving a purpose now of the 3 children in the cottage while they're, doing these courses that they're doing.
Yeah, I think we all accept the situation that you're in, and the personal situation you've explained, Abby, but we've got to consider it in line with strict planning regulations and this planning application.
Yeah.
So please forgive us if we don't take that. We can't take that into consideration. We have to look at it purely from a planning.
Yeah, well, I've already put in pre-planning before this application and addressed all the issues of the washing line and everything else and whatever else they wanted to do, the turning circle, the parking and everything else. I've already addressed all this in the 4th set of revised plans that I've had done to address all of that. So I have taken all that on board. I haven't just drawn up a little house and this would be very nice. I had an architect draw this up and a planner to oversee it. It's not something I've just sketched up on a pad and thought this will solve our problems.
Yes.
But it is classed as infill, and plenty of other people do build between A and B. But I have taken a lot into consideration with Alison's property.
Yeah.
I've proposed to just bang it up against her boundary wall and everything else. So,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Alison, do you want to?
Oh,
Come
yes,
back.
if I may. Can I
Yeah.
just to confirm, it does actually affect my boundary because my boundary wall butts up to your garage, which you are taking down. So there will be a massive gap in between. I understand the house is going to be built 3 metres away from my boundary wall, which is only then 4 metres away from my house. So there will be an area that you either have, I don't know what you're proposing to do.
But you told me only the other day that the wall was falling down anyway. The
That's
boundaries
my wall.
subsiding.
That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about my wall. We're talking about the back.
If I was to
I
take-
just wanted to.
If I was to take down the gym, if we were to take out the gym, we would be open to your back garden anyway. There would be nothing there if we were to rebuild the garage or anything else. You still will get a boundary wall. Obviously,
No, my boundary wall does. I don't see your gym from my boundary wall. I can just see the roof line. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the actual garage that's coming down. There's their wall. The garage wall is part of my boundary on my boundary line because my walls butt up to the garage. So that's one point. So it does affect me, but I have nothing in writing to say how that's going to be put right if it gets passed. And also, just to confirm, the window that you said in my hallway is actually one of the 2 lights, and it's on the side of my property.
No, it's not. It's on the back of your property.
It's the
You
side
live
of
at
my
one. You live at 1 Battleborough Lane. Your front door is at 1 Battleborough Lane.
Abby,
I don't want to argue because I don't want to pull out, but I'm
we
also
can see
trying
the
to voice
difficulty,
my
but-
view.
these aren't strict planning matters for
Yeah.
us. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, but that was to do with the site, the overshadowing and the loss of light,
Okay.
which is what I was concerned about.
You take your point. Okay. Thanks, Abby. Mary,
I'm sorry, I can't stand
that's
up.
fine. As long as we can hear you, Mary, that's fine.
I've come on behalf of Bill Briggs. He's worried about the new roundabout, the structure on Edith Mead, and he's written a letter already, I think last month, to the council. And what he's saying is that the agenda, is it raised an order that the parish council may formally assess any impact of the subject from the vehicles from the highways, and to keep local residents fully informed in the measures of introducing the highways agency. The contractors respect district and county councils to ensure said scheme has no or little effect on Brent Road, Burton Road and Brent Street, and not use any alternate route by vehicles through the traffic. Wishing to the bypass forthcoming on the A38, A37, M5 Junction 22 highways improvement works on Brent Knoll Village over the local villages. Did you all hear that? I've given you a copy.
Bob,
I think the only update I can give you at the moment is obviously the current scheme that's being talked about is a major road network review, basically from the far side of Bristol Airport right the way through to Edithby Roundabout. The plan is to allow traffic to flow more freely along that section of road.
Yeah.
So they are looking to review the Edithby Roundabout to potentially increase the number of lanes going into it, and to potentially put a lane through it as well,
Yeah.
and put it under traffic light controls. Now at the moment it's not definitely going to happen, because what the stage they're at is they have drawn up draft plans which have been consulted on, and obviously there has been the ability for people to send in their comments, and there's been a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
That is yet to go back to government to see if it will qualify for funding. If it does qualify for funding, they'll then draw up final plans which will again come out for further consultation. If it doesn't get the funding, then it goes no further, because it is obviously, because it's not just the roundabout, it is a series of other changes along the A38. So we will get further consultation, people will be kept in the loop, but there's nothing definite as yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you, Bob. Okay, that closes our public session. So that's your input now. Now it's our input. So, but once we've discussed the items that you're particularly interested in, don't feel as if you've got to stay. By all means, just carry on with whatever you need to do. Okay. Thanks very much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to to our September meeting after your summer break. First item, do we have any apologies, Larry?
Yeah, we have 4 apologies. Andrew Herkett, Warwick, and Nigel. In fact, Nigel's working. Warwick and Andrew are on holiday, and also Andrew Gilling, District Councillor. He sends apologies.
Those are apologies. Are you all happy that we accept those apologies? Thank you. Interest, declarations of interest, please. Bob?
Can I do this? Start off with, there's the normal planning one. As a member of the planning committee, obviously to avoid predetermination, I shall have to leave the room when you're discussing the applications. The next one is a personal interest on any items that come up relating to county or district matters in my role as the local councillor. I also need to declare an interest because there is an item relating to the parish hall as a trustee of the hall, and I also need to make a declaration that I am a shareholder in the village shop, and as such that's another personal interest but not prejudicial.
Thanks, Bob. Any other?
I have personal interest in 00009, which is not prejudicial.
Personal interest, which means that you can participate in the whole process.
As well.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Right. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, David. Sorry, beg
In planning 00009 personal interest and 00013 prejudicial interest.
So is that
I've got to go.
Prejudicial interest will mean you need to leave the room, of course.
Yeah.
And personal interest, you can remain in the room.
and we'll have a quorum?
We will. John, what is your position on
Sorry?
what is your position
On
on
56.
I don't have a particular interest on that. The only thing is, should the planning go ahead, there will be some windows overlooking my field, or my field is overlooked by a lot of windows.
So,
That's all interesting. I'm not worried.
well, I think that's neither nor there technically. I think it's a question of whether you want to declare a peculiar interest on the application discussion. That's the
I
issue.
don't think I do have a peculiar interest on the application.
It's matter for you, John. Nobody can force you to declare an interest. The only thing I would say to you is, if you don't declare an interest and subsequently some matter arises, it could be filed against you because you haven't declared an interest. So if you feel that you don't have a peculiar interest, absolutely fine. We have to accept that. But I have to give you a sort of recommendation that if you are affected by it in any way, then you
Well,
should
it doesn't
declare.
affect my domestic property in any way.
Fair enough. Okay. You've all received a copy of the minutes of our last meeting on the 21st of July. Are you happy that they're a true record of that meeting and they're available? I can sign them as a true record. Could you indicate, please? Thank you.
Just on the question of minutes, Colin, I'll make a comment. We've still got some to sign actually from the last 12 months while we've been doing virtual meetings. So we'll pick up those, we'll give you all that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, planning. Item 4, the first planning, 0721 0009, Water Street. Thanks, Bob. Andy.
Okay. There's a map there printed out for councillors to have a look at. First thing to say is Andrea, Nigel and myself came together to discuss this, so I'm putting forward the planning committee's views on all of these planning matters. So if we look at 00009, the applicant is Jenna Design and Planning. It is the land that's been discussed in Middle Street. It's change of use for a number of 12 glamping pitches, solar table for 8 to 100 panels, relocate an earth bund, formation of car park area, nature sculpture trail, bird watching, wildlife meadow, black poplar plantation, planting of natural hedgerows and some native trees and planting of some rare types of apple trees. For the basic background application, there are 8 documents to have been read. In plans, there were 5 documents to be read. Consultees, there were 8 documents to be read. And interested parties, there on Friday night, and I believe there are more going on as we speak, there were 31 documents to be read. I have a point for the council that I need to just air and take your advice on. General Design and Planning have been engaged on behalf of Strategic Trading Limited. It appears that this might have a slight conflict to the applicant, but we are laymen, so we don't know the full ruling behind that, in that the applicant and those companies are linked. There is also mention of Hardacre, my apologies, Buildings Limited, in the flood risk assessment, which I will pick up later. And that is by General Design and Planning on behalf of. This is an area where we will need to seek advice from District Council, because at this point I'm not sure if we're qualified to say whether that is conflict of interest or not, or certainly conflict of neutrality. So if everybody's okay with that comment, I'll carry on. Chairman?
Yes, please carry on.
Okay, so what we've done, just reminding everybody, because there's a lot of, 31 interested parties, passed that round. That's against, this is the criteria that we're asked to judge us against. It's a highly emotional area, it would appear, for the village. It's always good to be talking about businesses that want to improve in the village, so there are some good aspects, and then there are some objections, but our whole aspect of this is to check the planning application against the planning rules. So against design and architecture, there have been concerns, and the planning committee are concerned about how the shepherd huts will actually look at the end. We've got a drawing of, but not a full plan of how this will look. And there is mention of bunds obscuring the views. We would like just a little bit more detail on that. The layout and the density of the site and the look of it is difficult because the diagrams don't really give us an idea of how this will look from a distance. So the concern there is that it might be out of keeping if it is visible from the rest of the village and buildings in that area. And that in its turn would affect the characteristics of that area. Now there is some discussion around whether the Caravan Club had 12 pitches or 5 pitches. My understanding, and our understanding at planning, is this was only granted for 5, but the licences have not been discovered for that 5 either. And we believe there is an issue for county to confirm that the 5 is the rule, and then after that there needs to be planning permission. So again, that's another item that we'll put in before the parish, before the council. Highway consideration, there are concerns raised and individuals from the planning team have walked the path. There is concerns raised about the narrow path, the single track, the deep green on one side, high hedges, farm traffic. Obviously in the village there's no street lighting. It has been highlighted in the report that more people movement along this road will be increased, and there will be increased traffic. And there will be increased cycling and pedestrians to the road. In the documents that have been submitted by the applicant, they actually talk about increased use of the road for people coming to the village and using the facilities, and use from the Tranquility Park, walking back to such as the pub. And that bikes will be provided as well. So when we look at that, there will be an increase in traffic, there will be an increase in pedestrians, and there will be an increase in cycling. Traffic considerations, when we looked at this, there are 12 sites to be established, plus the stated aim to attract train spotters, bird watchers, day trippers and families to enjoy the walks and the tranquility of the park. This runs contrary to the application in some of the statements, which states that the traffic will not be subsequently increased because this is a tranquility park, and on arrival a number of the journeys will be reduced as the campers use walkways, cycles, etc. Others will have to find that come onto the site. There are a number of parking sites, but if they are attracting more people into the area, there could be pressure on parking, and that could cause additional parking restrictions on the road. It is a one-way road, and therefore the entrance and the exit is the same, and it's a single track, so that has raised concern. The highways have rated this as further consideration. The current limited traffic along the road, looking at multiples that we try to work out is it a significant increase, is it not a significant increase? And we looked at a number of ways of planning that. But the very fact that the document, and if the site is as popular as one would hope to be, as it's a business, then we might see a significant increase in the volume of traffic coming to the site, staying at the site, and then eventually leaving. The applicant states that the traffic flow is visible from the main camping site, or the main site, my apologies, but we didn't feel that that was sufficient because there are restricted numbers of passing points along the track, and you wouldn't really be looking from the bund down the track to see if you could make your escape. So we felt that there was some area there that needed to be looked at. The design and access statement states that the parking area has been allocated for the occupants of the holiday, and it does give 2 per site, so 2 per site, plus for day trippers. The application states that no existing and additional spaces will be provided. So if we do, so in that document, the confusion comes through that if they've built enough sites for people to bring 2 cars to site, and we have additional people coming to site, is there sufficient car parking on site, or do they have to park in their own? Provisions, Network Rail have stated in the application, and I do note that in the conversation that this is being challenged on a planning application, but as we read at this current time, Network Rail have stated that the application is invalid on the grounds that the red line in the plan encroaches Network Rail land. So if that is being challenged at this point in time, that point has not been cleared. Turning facilities, there appears to be one lay-by area only, and question over the risk of increased traffic and congestion and harm to pedestrians and people using the access. Means of access is questionable on the entrance and the exit to Burton Road. Single track, single point of entry, no through road at the top, and just a byway. And on the highway code, the risk of increased pedestrian and cycle activity with increased traffic and single traffic on the road, no footpaths, limited space, either side of the tarmac to avoid the traffic. So we felt that there could be a highway code issue for us. We then look at the landscape impact. The proposal talks about compact nature trails, sculpture trails, bird watching, large plantations, etc., and seems to be very much on the side of creating a tranquil environment. And that's to be applauded, and we felt that was a great point. However, the landscape officer reports that the detailed landscape plan has not been submitted in support of this application, and in her words, I shall require a landscape master plan with a planning schedule. There is detail on the land bund being constructed, but I picked up on the site that there was a previous application, which I'll have to ask the team to look into, about the movement of soil. I was unaware of that and found nothing in the documentation currently on site to read about that. But there are many comments regarding the views from other parts of the village, and there was a view that it would be difficult without a proper plan in front of us to see how that would be concealed from all aspects of the village. So there were comments from the planning team that they didn't see how this was completely obscured in the middle street. There were, so on Vantage Point, there were concerns that we discussed the point. Landscaping, while expressed ambition, there was no detailed plan. Water management, the application assessment appears to have been created for the erection of an agricultural building some time ago, rather than the current proposal. The recommendation from the SDC is to have this updated. The assessment refers to less vulnerable, as the huts will be 24 inches off the ground under the Environmental Agency guidelines, and the site is more vulnerable as this is a holiday park and short night camping. However, because of proximity, that could be argued that has been ruled out. However, in the flood risk assessment, it appears that no additional plans to manage this have been submitted at this point, and Sandra Patterson's letter is objecting, and I have the letter of objection on here if anybody wants to go into that. So impact on protected species, the application states protected priority species, designated sites, important habitats, other biodiversity features. However, these are not identified in the ecology report that was submitted, and the planning of the nature object planning and nature object very strongly to this application. In our view, is their comment, the assessment is not sufficiently detailed to make an accurate assessment of the impact of this current development. The ecology report from Western Ecology, which was submitted on this application, is also out of date and was published in 2018 and valid for 24 months. We're out of that date period. The ecology report appears to be originally for an agricultural building. This has become important to planning as the report states that there is a potential for bats to forage and commute along those boundaries. Residential amenity, I think we've covered that in the comments above. So in conclusion, reading everybody's recommendations and all the documents, the planning policy from SDC, dated 9th of the 8th 21, says the recommendation is to support the application subject to adequate parking, confirmation of the proposal that would have a negative impact on bat activity, and the solar table would not create unacceptable level of glare with regard to tourism, accommodation and attraction. The Jenner document refers to the recycling of animal railway containers, and at the moment we're not sure how that actually appears in the architectural mode. Environmental health are concerned about foul drainage, and they quote, "There is insufficient or no information for them to make a ruling." And the Environmental Agency recommend planning permission be refused on 6 criteria. There is a Network Rail have also said this is an infringement, and at this point, the comment made earlier, we cannot clarify that, but at this point we believe it's still an infringement. And the landscaping officer requires detailed planning to the set schedule. Any questions from councillors?
Any questions from Andrew? That's pretty comprehensive. There are various issues that have been raised there, in particular access, and lack of it, increased traffic. The flood assessment, I understand, is a bit out of date and needs addressing. Andrew did make reference to the fact that there may well be a conflict of independence in the reports that have been presented vis-à-vis the applicant. He has written all the reports, essentially, all his business, and there may seem to be a lack of independence there in those reports. Highway code, he does point out, could be potential breaches of access. There is consideration also for impact on the environment, which Andrew has addressed. There is no foul water drainage being addressed at all in the application of the sites that are proposed to be erected. And also, I'm also concerned, and I know it's not probably necessarily a planning, we can't anticipate what might happen, but I am concerned about the design of the shepherd's huts and the materials that are going to be used in the construction of the site. I think we've got to be careful in this, that we don't put through an eyesore which the village will not thank us for. But again, I just voice that opinion of what could happen, and I know that's not a planning matter. Andrew has outlined various problems there, and for that reason,
Before Chairman, this is a major application, not a straightforward planning application, so that gives it slightly different criteria under our rules. So it is a major application.
That's okay. So I think really that the proposal from Andrew has been that essentially we must reject this application based on all the evidence that has been presented tonight by Andrew, evidence that's been presented in the people that have addressed us tonight, I think we need to formulate these opinions in your letter, Owen, which I can pass on to you there, but they're all detailed there. So I think that's our proposal, fellow councillors, that this application is rejected on the basis that we've heard tonight and on the basis that Andrew has declared to us. So is there a seconder for that? Malcolm? Okay, all those in favour of refusing this application? That's unanimous. Thank you. Our next application is 0013, 56 Brent Street. Please don't feel you have to stay now we've dealt with 0009. Okay, can we press on with 56 Brent Street, please, Andrew?
Okay, again, there's a map here for individuals to look at so that we know what we're talking about. Application number 0721000013 is a full planning application. The applicant is Mrs. Winterson. The location is 56 Brent Street. It is erection of a two-storey detached dwelling with attached garage and formation of access on site of existing outbuildings to be demolished. Also the erection of a garage for existing dwelling. Application took 4 documents, plans took 9 documents to read, consultees took 5 documents to read, and interested parties, there were 2 entries as of Friday night. There have been major areas of concern displayed tonight by both parties. The main areas of concern, which I've tried to put into our standard form of document, so I'll go through those. On the design, there is an over-dominance, a question of overshadowing. Basically, it's pushing on the boundaries of the neighbouring properties. There was a feeling that it was basically an overcrowding and therefore could constitute as an overdevelopment of site. The visual appearance came under scrutiny. We were trying to determine the height of the building in relation to the surrounding buildings, which tend to be of an older standard and therefore tend to be lower in height. And the newer building appears to be in a higher position and therefore could cause a visual to the street nature. And there was a question of overview into other properties on that site. So under residential amenity, the feeling was that it was probably constitutes as an overdevelopment and pressure on the boundaries. The design concerns are the height and the style amongst the traditional cottage of that type along that part of the street. The flooding concerns on close proximity to the ditches, culverts, etc., plus objection from the environmental agency was raised. Wessex Water Foul Water Management say that unknown surface water and runoff was not sufficiently planned or explained in their documentation. And those were the main observations of the committee.
What is, you've outlined dominance, overshadowing, overcrowding, overdevelopment, visual impact of the, in relation to the positions of the other properties.
Yes.
Are those, I mean, obviously those are legitimate planning objections. And is this the recommendation of your committee, is it?
It is. And the concerns over flooding and foul water management. And the concerns over flooding was the property is very close to ditches, culverts, and there seemed to be some discussion about the ditch and the culvert and the operation of those working as a type of green for that vicinity. So something needs to be looked at.
Okay. So it seems to me that your planning committee are recommending that we refuse this application based on the fact that there could be overshadowing, potential overcrowding and overdevelopment of the site through infill, which is always a problem, and also the visual impact of the property from the road, together with flooding and foul water management. These are things that we cannot address. Yes, Ryan?
Could you develop a bit more about the overcrowding?
Yeah, the feeling was and it's probably because of the boundary drawings and looking at the design, it's an infill site and it was very full on the infill site and the hard standing. And I think that the main pressure of that was again against the ditches, the culverts and the reeds in that area rather than anything else.
Thank you.
That's the proposal of your planning committee, based on those items, those particular items. So that's the proposal. Do I have a seconder for that? Cynthia, okay. All those in favour of refusing this application, please. That's unanimous. Okay, our next one is it's not really a Brent Knoll application, it is a Burnham application, but 1121 Trevellow 11, are we just...
No observations. The committee did say it's a big piece of land. It previously had vets. It's got a wind turbine on it. The buildings in that area are similar to the one being built, so there were no observations.
So that's a proposal that we just let this one go through with no observations. Oh yes, sorry, can you get David? We want David back. Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
David? So small.
You can imagine that.
Swing, not swing.
Where are you?
Go around the front.
But we don't have to do 17.
No, it's contact.
So we just...
See that? See that?
the number of that.
Well, I'm... David, yeah. You know that's right. What will be that? 56. Hi, John. How are you?
Very well, yourself?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks.
Where were you?
Did you want to say anything?
I'm just thinking those.
All right.
I can count that.
I'll run away.
Sorry, David. On 1121 Trevellow 11, which is erection of stables and feed store land in south of RSPCA Rescue Centre, Brent Knoll. It's a Burnham application, but we're just putting it through, hopefully with no observation.
That's fine.
All those in favour? Thank you. Right, our last one is Trevellow 19 Sunnycott in Church Lane.
I was at the meeting this afternoon, and the gentleman who lives next door brought in the wrong information here. photographs. So would you like to pass them over to you? Because obviously he lives next door.
Has he made comments or just
Made
raised
comments?
Well,
Is he objecting or?
Well, he was just showing us that there is in the woods there are a lot of the newts, the snakes, as good as there's what. And I obviously they're going to build that. That was one of his observations. He was also considering he was worried about the boundary.
There's notes on the plan, what he said.
But he left those with us, and I was asked to pass them on.
I believe so.
Sorry, John. Thank you. No, that's wrong. That's wrong.
That's wrong.
That one is wrong.
He wasn't, and he was considering.
Partial demolition is right.
Demolition concerns, that was raised. Building line was raised as an issue. Overlooking front and back first floor.
What number was this?
This is 19.
Oh, 19.
Floodplain, flood zone 2. Traffic, church lane.
Yes, yeah.
4 extra vehicles, poor access. Church lane. Snakes, newts, which is what you said, didn't you? Those are the key things actually. That were raised as objections to back up presumed progress.
Okay. All right. Go on then. Let's hear what the planners have to say.
It's 00019 is the erection of 2 dwellings on the site of existing dwelling, which is to be partially demolished. There was only one real comment, which was about style, but when you read through their documentation, the planners have said they've taken into consideration the local look and the look of the street, and therefore the design for a 1980s style of design fits in with that locality. There were no objections, apart from the ones we just heard now, on the comment from all other parties and all other documents were that it was in favour of, could foresee no issues.
What essentially is, have you had a look at the plans, Cynthia?
No, I haven't.
Well, what they're doing, they are. Can I have those photographs?
We're putting up 2 houses, aren't they?
Yes, but yes, the site at the moment, as you know, is
Yes.
in a beautiful state. But what essentially they're doing, they're not demolishing all of the semi-detached house.
No.
They're demolishing half of it and creating a garage which holds 3 cars, which will be split to either property. So the existing property, occupied semi-detached house is kept intact.
Right,
But the new part will be a garage. And then there will be 2 houses, one built where the existing garage is, which is to the, would be the north of the site up towards the church, and another one will be developed towards the road by the school. And both houses would look at each other with a central driveway in the middle.
So they're not actually facing outwards?
No.
They're
They're facing each other, aren't they?
Yeah, facing one another.
They're facing each other. Yeah. And I think it's the recommendation of the planning committee that in fact we support this because it is creating 2 additional homes and it is creating something that is going to improve what at the moment is a site that really does need improvement.
Yeah. What about, because there are quite a lot of trees there, they're not going to cut them all down, are they?
There's been a lot of work on the trees already.
I know, they've taken a lot down about
Yeah,
huge amount.
A huge amount of trees have gone.
Oh yes, they have.
And they will undoubtedly go in the development, the majority of them.
Do you think they should put everything down there? Because it's,
Well,
They've got